Thank you very much for making your way to an absolutely fantastic evening. Welcome to The Big Pitch. My name is Gemma Paul. I am a midwife and part of the Clinical Entrepreneur Programme.
And my name is Pasha. I'm a vascular trainee, founder of SmartFlow, and also one of the NHS clinical entrepreneurs. And it is our privilege to welcome you all today to the home of science, the Royal Institute. Now, this evening, we will be showcasing some of the most exciting and innovative developments from our clinical entrepreneurs. And we have an incredible lineup of speakers and guests from across the NHS who are going to help us reflect on the successes of the programme so far and some of the challenges and opportunities that lie in the year ahead.
So let's tell you a little bit more about the Clinical Entrepreneur Programme in numbers. The Clinical Entrepreneur Programme was launched in 2016, and over the time we have built a community of over 881 clinical entrepreneurs from all corners of the NHS. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. This includes nurses, midwives, physiotherapists, pharmacists, doctors, and more.
That's right. And as you will hear tonight, our clinical entrepreneurs have done some amazing things and created real value for the NHS and the patients that we serve. For instance, our entrepreneurs have created a staggering 423 startups.
And these startups have created 2,850 jobs over the last 6 years. But something that we are particularly proud of is that as a result of this programme, 283 clinicians who have either left the NHS or thought about leaving the NHS has returned or been retained within our workforce. I think that deserves a massive round of applause.
Now, if you're new to the programme, where have you been? But we humbly welcome you. And instead of telling you what to expect in the year ahead of us, we thought instead we'd prepare a short video to show you. So we'll go over to that now. Let's have a look.
The programme is a really brilliant way to tap into the healthcare innovation ecosystem and to open up a whole world of opportunities for you and your projects.
There's a well-planned programme. You get to meet great people and you belong to the family of clinical entrepreneurs. This is brilliant.
You're meeting your tribe. These are people who have the energy of being innovators, also to meet some amazing contacts and networking, and just to be exposed to some globally relevant companies.
I think one of my favourite moments on the programme so far has been presenting to the Medical Advisory Group and the CEO of the NHS, Amanda Pritchard.
Being directors, be it midwives, doctors, physiotherapists, people that I would have never have been able to be in front of.
At every pit stop, I've always come away with some surprise, connection.
Without the Clinical Entrepreneurship Programme, I never would have got this idea off the ground.
Gain lots of business skills, pitching practice.
Support, advice, experience, questioning, coaching, and a strategy.
The opportunity to think about how you can get your innovation into the NHS.
The mentor scheme has been absolutely phenomenal. To go from not wanting to stand up and present to standing up in a room full of several hundred people and doing a presentation that I enjoyed.
Everybody's really there to help you, support you and encourage each other.
Don't even think twice about it, just do it. It's an amazing community, amazing place where an idea, far-fetched idea by two young, naive medical students can become a funded reality.
Amazing stuff. Thank you. So next, it is my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker for this evening, Professor Sir Stephen Powis, the National Medical Director of NHS England and Professor of Renal Medicine at University College London. As National Medical Director, he's responsible for providing clinical leadership and oversight for the NHS today, ensuring that patients receive safe, high-quality care, but he's also responsible for promoting new ideas and approaches to patient care that will shape our NHS tomorrow. So we are privileged to have him here with us this evening to share his insights with us. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Professor Sir Stephen Powers.
Well, thank you, Pasha. Thank you, Gemma. It's a real pleasure and a privilege to be here once again. So, deserted streets, public events cancelled, funerals without mourners, people afraid to leave their homes for fear of infection. Sound familiar? But I'm not talking about the last 3 years. This is a description of London in 1665, at the height of the plague. For the truth is, throughout the history of this great city, its citizens have repeatedly had to deal with the challenges of infectious disease. Outbreaks, plagues, epidemics, pandemics, Londoners have seen the lot. Plague first ravaged the city in 1348 and returned frequently to the city over the next 3 centuries. During the really bad years, the Black Death is estimated to have killed up to a quarter of the city's population. Now, by the 1800s, London, and Tim usually argues with me here, had become the largest, biggest city in the world, the most populous city in the world. And the overcrowding in the slums and the buildings built closely together inevitably meant there was going to be more infection. And so in 1831, a terrifying new infection reached the city, cholera, bringing with it fear and panic. And this was quickly followed by epidemics of influenza and typhoid, prompting the government to launch an urgent inquiry into the city's sanitation. And in 1918, at the end of World War I, the city was struck again by the Spanish flu pandemic, killing over 18,000 Londoners. But the thing is that as well as having to deal with the disease, this great city has shown the world how to beat disease. And it's done that through innovation, science, and people who just wanted to think a little bit differently. In the 1800s, London was the first city to introduce widespread vaccination, initially for smallpox. And that, of course, is based on the pioneering work of Edward Jenner in the late 18th century. In 1854, not very far away from here, just a mile away in Soho Square, John Snow proved that cholera was an infection not spread through the air, but through contaminated water. His meticulous work, studying the disease and linking it to a public water pump in Soho Square, formed the basis of the science that we now call epidemiology. And in 1928, Alexander Fleming made a chance observation that a fungal mold was killing the bacteria that he'd left in culture on the laboratory bench of St Mary's Hospital up in Paddington. And of course, that marked the discovery of antibiotics. So, we have beaten infection through innovation and science. Now, that being said, I'm sure everybody has found the last 3 years incredibly challenging. And it's really great that I think for the first time since the pandemic started, we're all here together once again, face to face. But it's really been remarkable, and you, like everybody, will have faced huge challenges, both in your professional lives, but also in your private lives. We've all had to change the way we work, the way we behave, and those personal sacrifices have sometimes been incredibly difficult and painful. For the staff of the NHS, it's undoubtedly been the most challenging time of their professional careers, and they have done absolutely remarkable things. And I've personally been overwhelmed by the dedication, the focus, the compassion, and really just the sheer determination of all my colleagues as they have got the nation through the pandemic. Now, of course, for me personally, it's also been a pretty interesting 3 years, a little bit different. In my role as National Medical Director, I'm well used to working closely with ministers, well used to appearing in the media, working with civil servants to develop health policy. Frankly, it's part of the job. But during the pandemic, I think medical, clinical, scientific leaders have been thrown into the heart of government in a quite unprecedented way. And for me, that's meant giving direct advice to a broader range of ministers across government, and of course, at times, direct to the Prime Minister. One of the most obvious examples of that were those Downing Street press conferences, of which I participated in about 35 eventually. And though at times really surreal, it was really quite a privilege to be able to speak to many millions of people live on television every night. My aim throughout was to tell it as it was, reassure, educate, inform, always trying to provide clarity and simplicity to what at times were quite complex clinical and public health questions. And I've really been struck ever since by the number of people who've approached me and said how much they anticipated those press conferences and how attentively they listened to what we had to say. They usually say that they listen to the scientists and the clinicians rather than the politicians. But, you know, the politicians knew that. And that's possibly why they worked so well. And of course, my aim throughout was always to focus on the medicine and the science and to leave the politics to the politicians. Easy to say, not always so easy to do. There were, of course, some lighter moments during those press conferences. As you might expect, I'm not doing it tonight, but when I appear doing interviews on the media, I always make sure that I've left my phone behind so that I don't get a text or a phone call. But whilst responding to a question during one particular Downing Street briefing, I suddenly heard Siri, the iPhone personal assistant, chirp up in response to a question live on television and say, "I'm sorry, I don't know the answers to that question." Now, both I and Rishi Sunak, who was standing next to me on the next podium, jumped. Well, at least I think we both jumped a little bit. And you probably, if you're watching on television, might have seen us desperately feeling our pockets to work out who had forgotten to leave their phone behind. But of course, it wasn't the phone at all. It was my Apple Watch. So much for technology. So, of course, the lesson is leave the watch behind, as well as leaving the phone behind. Now, behind the scenes, I've also spent the pandemic, talking to politicians across the political spectrum, many briefings for MPs, for peers, whatever their political persuasion, whatever their political parties. And I have to say, I was struck by the interest, the gratitude for the work the NHS was doing and the support they gave, whatever their backgrounds. And I do recognise that for political leaders, the pandemic has been incredibly challenging. It doesn't matter which political party you're in, which country you're governing. Pandemics give you a set of really difficult and sometimes lousy choices. It is a difficult task. And of course, it remains a difficult task, as you will see as you look at countries throughout the world. I'm often asked what it's like working with politicians. Well, in my experience, I have to say, they've always been kind. They've always been attentive. They always listen and treat me with respect. And I think one of the dangers is when people ask, do they listen to you? Do they take advice? The danger is actually to assume they don't take advice, because they actually do listen very carefully and they take advice. And so the advice you give has to be considered and it has to be well thought through, because they will act on it. Now, they obviously have to take a range of advice into consideration, but nevertheless, in my experience, they listen very carefully to what you have to say. It's also been rather odd being a public figure. Whether that's being recognised in the street, having total strangers coming up and giving me their opinion, usually on Dominic Cummings, but not always. Being grilled on Sunday mornings by Andrew Marr or Laura Kuenssberg, or indeed having an actor playing me in a TV documentary. Celebrity has its moments, but to be honest, I'm not sure I would want it permanently. And although much of the pandemic, I'm sure like you, is now a bit of a blur, you will have days like I have that you remember in absolute intense detail. You remember pretty much every moment of what happened on that day. One of those days for me was December the 8th, 2021. Now, some of you might have heard this story before, so apologies. But that was the day that I was privileged enough to be in Coventry to witness the first vaccine for COVID delivered outside of a clinical trial given to Maggie Keenan. I remember the day well. I'd arrived about midnight the day before, driven up from London, Arrived at the hotel, pretty deserted hotel, probably a few journalists there for the next day. Spent about an hour with my press team going through the questions that I was likely to be asked the next day. Up at 5 o'clock, drove to a really foggy and really cold hospital in Coventry with the media all camped outside the main entrance. Started interviews at 6 o'clock. I think the first was with ITV. Paused briefly for the first jab, which was given at 6:30. I know that because it's date stamped, time stamped on the picture I took on the iPhone. Of course, we released the news at 7 o'clock just to make sure everything went well, which it did. And then continued with interviews for the rest of the morning. And at the end of the day, I drove back to London, got back 8 o'clock in the evening. And as I stepped out of the car, I got a text message from Emily Lawson, who was the head of the National Vaccine Programme, now the director of the Prime Minister's Delivery Unit. And it read, I've had 2 episodes of anaphylactic shock. Should we be worried? So I walked into the house, marched past my wife, who had got dinner waiting, upstairs on the phone to JVT, Chris Whitty, June Rain at the MHRA, and then spent hours into the early morning working out with the MHRA what we needed to do. And you will remember at 6 o'clock in the morning, we were up doing a webinar for all the vaccine centres around the country, telling them they had to put in a 15-minute waiting period, because we'd vaccinated more people in that first day than had been vaccinated in all the clinical trials. And these issues were starting to raise. Good news is, very rare event, managed through adjusting the criteria for vaccination, making sure that people were safe immediately after vaccination. But I think it shows just the agility and the flexibility that the NHS and other organisations had to go to in the pandemic to make everything work and make it work at pace and work at speed. So, I clearly recall on those days, those interviews, saying that day felt like an historic moment. And I still think it was an historic day. And the reason for that, it was the point in the pandemic that the response moved from one using age-old techniques of quarantine, keeping people apart from each other, to the point at which science, technology and innovation took over. And from that day on, vaccines and now therapeutics have taken the load. They have taken the strain. And I don't think any of us at the start of the pandemic 3 years ago would have anticipated that within 9-10 months we would be at the point where a vaccine was in clinical use and could be delivered en masse to populations. And I think that just shows how important science, innovation, and the speed at which things can be developed these days is so important in all of our clinical lives, but also so important for our citizens and population. So there was another reason that I'm a bit emotionally attached to that day, and that was because when I left Coventry, I had with me in my bag the vial that had been used for that first injection. And I brought it back to London. And the reason that I had it was because the Science Museum, just down the road in Kensington, had asked if I could bring it back and hand it over to the Science Museum. I had it in the house for a few days. Science Museum getting more and more worried about where it was. Occasionally took it out and had a look at it. But of course, when I did go to the Science Museum a few days later and hand it over, in that act of handing over, which they did incredibly carefully, it suddenly became an historical artefact. Something that will be on display in the Science Museum for hundreds of years to come. A real moment, a historical artefact that marks a real historic moment. Now, why am I telling you all this? Well, the reason is that it's because of innovation, it's because of the principles of experimentation, of thinking differently, of science, combined with that rigorous experimental approach that got us through the pandemic, that got us through at the pace that we didn't think was possible at the start. We've seen that in the development of the new vaccines. We've seen it in the rapid stand-up of clinical trials, recovery, panoramic, to work out which therapeutics work, and probably just as importantly, to work out which ones don't. We've seen it in the way NHS staff and NHS processes had to adapt to take all the patients that we had to take in the first and second wave. We've seen it in how people adapted the way that therapy was given, new devices to deliver oxygen, new techniques, all developed at pace and scale because people had to innovate rapidly in response to an emergency. Now, I could go on, but the point is that clinicians are really good at innovating. They are really good at thinking out of the box, doing things differently, experimenting, but all the time with that sort of scientific rigor that we have as part of our training in the background. And it's why it's so important for the NHS that this programme exists, why it's so important for us that we support you as clinical entrepreneurs and others who want to do things differently, who want to think out of the box, who want to drive innovation and drive development. So I'm really grateful once again to the programme. It's astonishing that in the last 6 years, some of the stats you've heard already, over 880 NHS staff trained in clinical entrepreneurship, over £850 million of funding raised, 420 startups, 16,000 occurrences of organisations adopting clinical entrepreneur innovations. I could go on, but you've already told us some of the stats. And I know that each one of the entrepreneurs, each one of you on the programme, brings with you your own personal, unique insight, your own personal ideas and experience, and your own personal skills and expertise to solve the problem that you are trying to solve. And it's really why tonight is one of my favourite nights. I really love coming. I really hear learning what you're doing, and it's really special to be able to do it again once more face to face. So without further ado, I'm going to shut up because you haven't come here to hear me. You've come here to hear each other and to hear the pitches of the entrepreneurs. So let's get on with it. Back to you.
Let's get to our pitches. We're going to hear from 4 incredible clinical entrepreneurs. Each of those will have 90 seconds to deliver their pitch. Now, to make sure that we get the most out of this evening, we're going to give a gentle clap to indicate that it's the end of their time and to thank them for their contribution. And I would love everybody else to join in, otherwise it would be quite awkward if it was just me and Pasha. So let's just have a practice.
That's great. Perfect. So, to kick off, I would first like to introduce onto the stage George Ampat, who is the founder of Free From Pain. Over to you.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I'm Dr. George Ampat. I'm a consultant orthopedic surgeon from Liverpool. Now, I want to tell you a story of twin sisters. They are Dorothy and Susie. They are now 76 years of age. Dorothy is in the UK, whereas Susie has moved over to New Zealand, emigrated to New Zealand 50 years ago. Dorothy developed knee pain, was referred to the hospital and underwent a total knee replacement. Unfortunately, following the surgery, she has more pain in the knee than what she was experiencing prior to surgery. Susie, her sister, was warned. 2 years later, she developed knee arthritis. She went to her doctor in New Zealand. Susie was told, well, we don't do surgery first. Let's put you into a strengthening program of exercises. Susie did the strengthening program of exercises for 12 weeks and found her knee pain was better. She was able to cope with it. Dorothy was sad that she was not given the option of exercises prior to having the surgery. Now, Dorothy is not very uncommon. These patients exist in the system. You, as doctors, would have seen the Dorothys that I'm talking to you about. I see them. And that is why I invented Free From Pain. Free From Pain is not just another exercise program. It is an exercise program along with the neuroscience therapeutic education, whereby we can nudge them to do the exercise. It is not just an exercise program. And that is where the benefit of the unique point of Free From Pain is. So Free From Pain is what
Thank you. We next would like to introduce Deb
Gompres, who is going to present her project. I know it's brutal. I know it is. It is. We really don't want to do this, but thank you. Deb is going to be presenting her project, Show Me Your Meds, Please.
The biggest waste of medication is that medication that's prescribed and never taken. Each year, the NHS loses hundreds of millions of pounds in medication that's not taken properly, which could be funding new hospitals each year. My name is Deb Gompertz, and I'm the lead complex care GP in South Somerset. Our solution to identify medication not taken, we've called Show Me Your Meds, Please. We ask our community colleagues on routine home visits to simply ask to look at people's medications. 1 in 4 people aren't taking their medications as prescribed, and these people have not been picked up on normal structured medication reviews. We're not talking small amounts of medication here. We're talking 3 to 6 months of medication, commonly heart failure medication causing admissions to hospital, a year of Ventolin inhalers, 3 years of pre-filled insulin pens. We're creating a digital platform with multi-compartment aid DOSIT boxes to try and identify these people and to pick up early cognitive impairment. Often cognitive impairment is one of the causes that people don't take their medication correctly. 500,000 trees need to be planted every year to offset the carbon emissions for the drugs wasted each year. If you're interested in appropriate prescribing for person-centred care, saving the NHS lots of money and having a positive impact on the environment, and you've got influence in this space, then I'd love to chat to you. Thank you.
Perfectly to time. Thanks very much, Deb. So next we have Raj Kohli, who is the co-founder of Health Tech One. Over to you.
Hi, thanks for the introduction. Yes, I'm Raj, I'm the co-founder of Health Tech One, and I'm going to start today by telling you a story. The story is of Sue. She works in a GP practice in Durham, and she's been working there for 23 years. Now, she tells me that she's forgotten her age, but the one thing she never forgets is to keep the autumn months free, because alongside 19 other registration clerks, she'll be clocking in at 6 a.m. Monday to Sunday to process the thousands of registrations, new patient registrations that come through the university rush. Now just imagine that room. All those administrators in a room covered in paper, each of them entering into the clinical system line by line manually, over 500,000 data points over the course of 3 months. Now, Sue represents the silent other half of our NHS workforce. Not the clinicians, but the receptionists, the administrators, the secretaries, who do the silent work that won't make the headlines. And that's where Health Tech One comes in. We automate admin tasks in GP practices. Right now, we automate 1% of all new patient registrations in this country. And as a result, in October last year, our Sue... that was quick.
I'm so sorry. And last of our pitches, we have Sinead Welsh, founder of Informed Minds.
My nephew Jack was only 21 when he made an attempt to end his own life. I will never forget Jack sobbing into my pink, fluffy jumper. That day was the beginning of Informed Minds app. I'm Sinead Welsh, an international social work specialist, having spent over 10 years in Melbourne, Australia, working in child abuse, trauma and mental health. Founded in Northern Ireland, Informed Minds app is an ORCA-accredited app. Underpinned by quality assurance, we use the power of personal storytelling, showing vulnerability as strength. We couple this with curated content of professionals, offering you their expertise so you can take control of your own mental wellness. And of course, we offer signposting to support for those who need more. We know mental health is responsible for a substantial amount of poor health. We know the NHS is seeking digital health solutions that are localised, cost-effective and rooted in prevention. Using the 50k grant we secured from Innovate UK, we have harnessed the abilities of artificial intelligence into our app to personalise the touch and feel for our users. The world has changed. People have changed, but leading by prevention has got to be the change. If you're an investor serious about mental health or a co-founder specialising in scaling an app, speak to me tonight. Thank you.
Wow, how fantastic were those pictures? Give them a whole big round of applause. Well done. It really does take some guts and a lot of practice to stand here and pitch your innovation. And now I am honoured to introduce a very inspiring and empowering panel session chaired by our wonderful Tamsin Holland-Brown, co-clinical lead for the Clinical Entrepreneur Programme and founder of Ear, Glue, Ear and Paediatrician.
In 1942, William Beveridge decided to look at society and what was the problem with society. And he wrote a report on what the biggest problems were. And the biggest problem, in his opinion, was social inequality in 1942. And he came to a conclusion that what would really work, or one innovation that might help, would be a cradle-to-grave social programme called a National Health Service. Lots of people disagreed with him. And that doesn't come as a surprise to a lot of our entrepreneurs. But in 6 years later, the Labour government decided that they were going to implement it. But what happens when you have an NHS service with inequality being addressed at its core is that you have workers who take that on as their core. And if 74 years later, you give them a platform to innovate, then they use that to make society more equal and fairer and more just. And that is what we're going to show you today in our social purpose panel. As Gemma kindly said, I'm a paediatrician, but my work over this year was, although I joined as a clinical entrepreneur, was to focus on a work stream of social purpose. And this panel here is a small panel of the number of clinical entrepreneurs that are unicorns. We think of a unicorn as being the 1 out of 10 people who commercialize and make $1 billion business. But we see 9 out of 10 clinical entrepreneurs making a huge impact to society. And the 4 people here have made the most enormous impact locally, nationally, and globally in a way that is extraordinary, really. And what the Clinical Entrepreneur Programme itself decided to do was to partner with a charity called Crisis, a homeless charity, which was identifying people who would benefit from a grant, a Changing Lives grant, and they were giving them an injection, so they were entrepreneurs too. And we thought that on this programme, we could support those entrepreneurs with mentorship, with networking, and with all of you. And so Mami Essie, who is there, has been successful with one of those grants and continues to change society with the work she's doing. I'm going to get them all to introduce themselves because there's so much for you to hear. There is not enough time tonight, so you will see that Wahid has got a stand because he's not just a clinical entrepreneur or just a doctor, but also an author. In fact, he didn't just win Doctor of the Year, he then won separately Person of the Year. And we also have Brad here, who is our first patient entrepreneur on the programme with... and not just lived experience of cancer, but the vice chair of the National Academy of Social Prescribing. And Malone has innovated as a medical student and continues with his innovation of black and brown skin. I'll let them introduce themselves and then we will find out more about their social purpose. Are you okay?
Hello. Hello. So good evening, everyone. My name is Malone Mukwendi. I am the founder of a company called Black and Brown Skin. And to simply put our mission in a nutshell, we want to transform healthcare for Black and people of color around the world. The global majority, not the minority. So that's what we do.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Brad, and I'm the founder and director of Alike. Jumping into the problem, I won't talk too much, but jumping into the problem, loneliness is a huge problem facing society. It can impact people's mortality by 26%. It's as lethal as found by research, is as lethal as smoking cigarettes. When you compound that with a cancer diagnosis, it can be extremely debilitating. I know this from lived experience, having been diagnosed with leukemia at age 19, and then again when I was 24. And in my hospital bed in Hammersmith Hospital, I was tapping into that raw emotion of feeling incredibly lonely and isolated. So that's where Alike comes in. It's a national charity created to combat loneliness and isolation that's caused by a cancer diagnosis. And we aim to use technology to meet our mission. So we've developed a iOS and Android peer support platform available to cancer patients and survivors 24/7, can access a community of people who understand what cancer is like to go through right in the palm of their hand.
I'm Mami Isi, and my innovation is on food, with the emphasis on West African dishes. So we have the food to go, food for health and well-being, and the corporate and events catering.
Thank you so much for bigging me up, Tamsin. What she didn't say was that I'm also a refugee, so and have faced many failures in my life. So I work in A&E, and I also work with World Health Organization as one of their digital health experts. I work with the UN as well, and I'm very honored to be NHS clinical entrepreneur and mentor. My experience has shaped actually what I do, whether it's in the NHS, whether it's entrepreneurship and globally. Because I see that vulnerable people have to be part of the solution. They have to be inclusive in all the solutions right from the start. There shouldn't be an added point later on added to companies or to non-profits or structures across the globe. And that's what I advocate for through the media, through my global health work. And the innovations that I founded, one is Teleheal. I founded in 2015. It is a non-for-profit startup, and it's a telemedicine organization that connects medical specialists from the NHS and across the globe to medics in low-resource countries and giving life-saving emergency and mental health support. And the second innovation that I'm about to launch soon, it is for-profit business startup called Arian Wellbeing to provide high-quality mental health services led by experts that are culturally matched and trauma-informed. That's where the gap is in the NHS. That's where gap in the private sector seems to be as well. And the reason why I'm interested in these two innovations is because vulnerable populations do suffer, and they have fallen through the gaps. And that's where I think when I hear other innovations from my colleagues here, I'm very honored to see that where those vulnerable populations, whether it's the homeless, whether it's the refugee, or where it's the people who can't afford, they have to be part of the solution in everything we do. Thank you.
It's a good lineup. It is a good lineup, isn't it? Just to whether you could tell the audience about what your social purpose is and why it's important to you.
So for me, I think my social purpose is just healthcare for minority people, simply because at med school, it was always crazy to me that we would get taught how to identify signs and symptoms on white skin, but every other person's skin tone is left out of the picture and people didn't know the answer. So I think for me, the social purpose now is to create an entire ecosystem of technology and products which are catered directly to Black and brown communities. So some of you might have seen the book that I co-authored called Mind the Gap. That's one part of the ecosystem. We've got another platform called Hitano, which is focusing specifically on big data to personalize healthcare for minority communities, and then everything else that comes in the future. So I think my purpose is almost redefining what the ecosystem looks like for healthcare for minority people, because at the moment, if I'm being frank, people are getting left behind, and almost the proof of people getting left behind is on our Instagram page. I went out to Brixton, recorded a few videos of people on the streets, and I think a lot of people will be very shocked to hear what people in Brixton had to say about healthcare for minority people. So at hitano.co if you want to watch the videos.
There's a few things that motivate me, not just my own lived experience and not just connecting with people. I really believe in the chemistry of connection. For Alike, it's providing a community that understands everything that you are beyond your diagnosis. It's a multifaceted thing. We believe in combating inequalities. What we provide is a space where people can express themselves in however they choose. I'm a gay non-binary person, so that's very important to me in being visible, in sharing my story and my lived experience. I'm very passionate about technology being used for good, and that doesn't just belong in for-profit companies. I really believe charities have a role to play in providing innovation and technology, and we should find a way to increase access for that. I'm really excited about what Alike can do around innovation, and a prime example is with this application. We have over 3,000 users now after 2 years, which I'm extremely proud of. We also have a really diverse community of people, having worked with leading charities in this area. We're also in early stage partnership discussions with Macmillan Cancer Support, which is incredibly exciting. But I think that's the data opportunities. So visibility isn't just the people that you see and the stories that you hear, but it's also data and visibility in data. And what we're creating is a back end, a pool of people, of data points. We know when people sign up to our platform what their age is, their diagnosis, their interests, their location. So we can use this to support research, to support clinical trials, to support access, to provide access to other services, whether that be locally or nationally. And I'm just incredibly grateful to be on the programme because I just get so inspired. It's an honour to be here. It really is, and to learn from everybody. And it really is helping Alike flourish and Alike grow. So that's what I'm really passionate about.
Nami?
For me, being innovative with food takes me back to my days in the lab at Imperial College. And what makes me spend sometimes 24 hours in the kitchen non-stop, it's one, you take an ingredient, and from that ingredient, you create something. And so for some people will say, I usually say, food is an edible art. At the end of it, you have this beautiful substance or something that you've plated. What you've created, what can you do with it? And that's the second part of my business. Maybe you've not wasted, and so you've created something. What can you do with it? You can look into food for well-being, food for health. You can look into bringing people together to socialize. You can look into being mindful about communities, which is why my focus is on West African dishes. We had a pitch on diabetes. When we look at the NHS, if we are creating solutions, are we being mindful of some of the communities, or are we leaving them behind? How can we solve the problems of the NHS? And I'll say that in being creative with food, another thing that, well, officially, I would say that through this program and building relationships, I am on the NHS's procurement as a catering supplier. And so knowing that staff training, you can enjoy more than a cold sandwich. And also on the 8th of March, with another entrepreneur from Crisis, I'll say we are having our first cook and draw, which we're hoping to bring to the NHS. Come straight to your trust, look after your staff, book us, we'll deliver it to you, and make sure that your staff are being catered for and you're all being looked after. And so out here with food, we create, and with food, we can bear in mind health and well-being and be mindful of communities.
Wahid, I know you have so much to say. We have 2 minutes left of this panel. Wahid is an author of his journey, and it's called In the Wars, and he's actually signing copies of his book today. If you want to, you should read it. It's amazing. All of this panel have more to tell you. There are other clinical entrepreneurs with huge social purpose. I want Wahid to give his final comments, but please find all of them and ask them about their social purpose and feel like you can grow your social purpose. Sorry, Wahid.
Thank you, Tamsin and Tony, again. So for me, the social purpose is to reduce healthcare inequality. As I mentioned early on, I have got an emotional connection to it. And I would encourage that personal interest and emotional connection to problems, because it's led me to understand the problem better, to understand the people experiencing the problem better, to identify the gaps in the market that provides unique innovations. It's actually the problem and people experiencing is the key part. The innovation comes last, which led me to founding the Teleheal. But then I also, it's the non-profit that I founded. But then I realized that actually, growing more through a medical career in the NHS, that there are healthcare inequalities in the UK. And we witnessed them through the pandemic, that how the BAME populations were hit the hardest. And I've just come back from the US filming a documentary, and I saw that there are pockets of inequality that are so deep. There's a high mortality rate amongst the black women, which I was analyzing. And that led me to see that actually healthcare inequalities don't just exist in low resource settings, they exist in our own society wherever we are. And that's why we should include them in our innovations right from the start, not towards the end. And that led me to founding Arian Wellbeing, that was soon to be launched, to include actually these vulnerable populations, where it's the BAME, it's people who've suffered trauma, not necessarily conflict, any trauma, and they are falling through the gaps of the mental health services, which hopefully we should address them. The added benefit of social impact startups is also that it gives you the goodwill of the people. We have got a team of highly skilled psychologists and experts who are working pro bono on an organization that I founded, because they're part of the mission. They don't do it for me. It's a mission-based. The other benefit is, of course, it will open doors that otherwise you can't just do it financially, like speaking to world leaders or even having dinner with Bill Gates. These are some of the examples. But I'm just mentioning it, that there are doors to be opened that once you focus on a mission, on a problem that society is suffering from. So ultimately, for me, it's about purposeful journey. It's not just a company, the revenue and so on. And that brings in the network, that brings in the partners. So whoever is interested to speak with me, I'd love to speak with you. Thank you.
But to demonstrate further the scale of impact that this program is having, we're excited to announce to you that almost 13,000 organizations have implemented clinical entrepreneur innovations in the past year. And over 130 million people have benefited from innovations that they have developed since the start of the program. And with that, I'll pass on to Gemma to introduce the first pitcher for this session.
I think that deserves a round of applause just right there. Wow, incredible. So now we turn our attention to the next 4 clinical entrepreneur pitches. You know how brutal it is, so keep it short. First up is Antoinette Honnigan, founder of Mother Tongue.
Can you imagine being in need of healthcare, but you don't speak the language? That's the reality of 29% of the birthing population throughout the UK who struggle to communicate. As a clinician with over a decade's experience within the NHS, I have a real understanding of these challenges. And what has always stood out to me is that we have the resources and the ability to address this. Not someday, but now. I'm Antoinette, founder of Mother Tongue. At Mother Tongue, we connect expectant mothers with multilingual practitioners via video streamed to any device. By centralizing a woman's linguistic and cultural identity, care is not only personalized and safer, but we improve engagement and overall outcomes. That's everything needed to reduce NHS costs. So if you're interested in making a positive social impact nationally, please get in touch. So this is an early stage startup, currently piloting in 4 trusts. I need your help to get more trusts on board, also need investment and enticing multilingual practitioners. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. So next we have Shula Zhu, co-founder of RapidX Bio.
I am Shula. I am an engineer and a doctor, and I'm here with my co-founder Nipun, who's a Cambridge physics PhD. So when a patient gets an infection, it takes an average of 8 days for them to get the right treatment. This delay leads to complications and deaths. And in the UK, infections actually kill 150,000 people per year. And globally, this number's more like tens of millions. So we want to shorten this 8 days down to 30 minutes. By developing affordable point-of-care PCR tests that can identify pathogens and resistance to antibiotics within 5 minutes. We use lasers and nanoparticles to speed up and miniaturize existing PCR technology. And so far, we've been able to identify E. coli bacteria in urine in about 10 minutes. And this is key to tackling urinary tract infections, which accounts for more than 13,000 deaths per year in the UK. So Nipun and I have a combined skill set in medicine, biomedical engineering, and optoelectronics. And we're currently making the prototype at the Cavendish Laboratory in Cambridge, and we're moving very fast. So we're preparing for a pre-seed round of £500,000, and of which a part has already been pledged. Thank you.
Next, we've got Latricia Chester, co-founder of Lighthearted AI.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. There is about 300 of us in this room tonight, and about 100 of us will die because of a cardiovascular disease, and about 50 will end up in intensive care. If we scale this number back to the UK population, that yearly 160,000 people die because of a cardiovascular disease, and 100,000 end up in the ICU. And this is despite about 30% of these people had seen their GP in the previous year with all the telltale symptoms. It's hard to diagnose cardiovascular diseases. I'm Lucrezia Chester. I have a PhD in AI and biomedical technologies and currently work in the NHS as an AI engineer. And my co-founder is one of the most prolific open source contributors in the world, which means that if you have ever used the Python programming language, you're using its functions. So we have developed a novel medical device that can diagnose cardiovascular diseases years before symptoms appear. In our feasibility trial, one of our healthy volunteers turned out to be unhealthy, so we told our volunteer to go get checked out in the NHS. One GP visit, cardiology visit, echocardiogram, MRI and CT scan, and 6 months later, he had the same diagnosis that we gave him in 10 seconds with our very cheap device that can work up to 15 meters distance without the use of an expert. So if you are an investor interested in knowing more, please come to talk to me afterwards.
Last but not least, for this particular pitch session, we have Emilios Lemionatis.
Thank you. Hi there. Thank you, everybody. It's such an honor to be here. My name's Emilios Lemoniatis. I'm a psychiatrist, and I'm the founder of Frontline Buddy. And at Frontline Buddy, our mission is hopefully something that's important to all of you, and that's to help make the NHS the best place to work in the world. A few years ago, as a consultant, I realized that workplace-based stress is incredible. It's something that's affecting us all. The pandemic didn't help, and it's still here, slowing us all down. 2 years ago, I partnered with Mid-South Essex NHS Foundation Trust, and we co-created the Frontline Buddy program, which is a streamlined program to help all staff from all parts of the system come together and work together to support each other and have supportive well-being conversations and improve the culture of the organization, one conversation at a time. 2 years on, we've had 1,500 supportive conversations. We've trained 150 buddies. We've shown impact on staff retention, well-being, and people's behavior according to the values of the organization. We've also got a strategic... Thank you. Thank you.
Matt, if it's okay, first off to you. You head up the umbrella organisation for innovation across the NHS. In your opinion, what are the biggest challenges that healthcare organisations face in terms of implementing and scaling the innovative solutions that we hear about today, and how can they be addressed?
Well, thanks for the easy starter. I don't know how much time everyone has for this as well. I think probably the main problem that we face at the moment in the NHS is that everybody is so busy with the business as usual. So lots of what my team do, lots of what the different partners across the AAC do is how can we convert sort of the conversations that we're having around innovation to be less about what is innovation as a concept, what is innovation as sort of a side project, how is innovation how do we bring innovation to solve the problems that the people in the NHS really care about for their patients? So I guess the big thing that most of my team's effort is spent on is how do we convert that conversation to actually change that and support staff to have those conversations. So that's absolutely the biggest thing. I think when it comes to scale, there's a wealth of challenges and there's some fantastic literature about it. The biggest thing we see, I'd say, in scale is it is very difficult to scale innovation more generally. And when we look at the spread, one of the biggest things we see, the biggest success factor we see in why some organisations are better at looking for that external innovation, so innovation coming into from other areas, the biggest thing we saw, and we saw this in a piece of work that we did with the Care Quality Commission a couple of years back, is there an empowered board-level person that can set the tone for the organisation, that can have the links into the clinical teams, that can have the links into the operational teams to drive that change through. That was the single biggest factor that we saw. Sometimes it was a specific person with innovation in their job title. Sometimes it was a medical director. Sometimes it was whoever it is at that board level that's got that interest to drive that through. So that was what we saw.
So, over to you, Jackie, if that's okay. So what is the role of a commercial organisation in the drive of healthcare innovation? And how can the public and private sectors work together effectively to achieve this goal?
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think, I've been mentioning throughout the day, from a commercial and procurement perspective in the NHS, we have to do better than what we're currently doing in terms of bringing innovation, small businesses and entrepreneurs through the process. So, and I'm going to talk very quickly about some of the 5 things that we're doing. So, there is this brilliant program that you're all on here. There's lots of pilots. You've been talking about how you get into a couple of trusts, 10 trusts here, 15 trusts here. But how do you scale that up? How do you go right across the NHS? And really importantly, how do you get those contracts? Because pilots are one thing, but pilots end. And then, a lot of you tell me the trust will turn around and say, we haven't got the funding for this. It was brilliant. It was a great idea. So we've got to be really, really deliberate about this. And there's a couple of things that I've been working on with Matt and Tony. So first of all, it's really simple, right? Let's put a repository out there that's got everybody's ideas on there because trusts don't always talk to each other. That's not a deliberate thing, but they don't. So the frustration from a commercial perspective is we're in, how do I get across? So very simple, let's put a repository in there, let's showcase. Let's make sure there's a one-stop place where we commercially can put everybody out there. The second thing is making sure you see our pipeline, our commercial procurement pipeline. You need to know what we're looking for as well. So often it's a push into the NHS, but we need to be able to publish our pipeline so you can see what things we're working on, what clinical ideas, where we're working on particular pathways. So that's really important. The third thing is got to train the procurement people out in the trusts that quite often are not used to working with small innovative groups and SMEs. They're not sure how to contract with you, and so we've got to spend time making sure that I've got to make sure that they understand their contracting pathways, the way we can I'm not going to use the word fast track. We don't do VIP lanes, as you know, but there are, the whole point of acceleration. So I think it's going to make a massive difference if all the people you speak to, all the procurement teams, and there's 4,000 of them out there in the system, they know how to do that, and we've given them the tools in order to do that. This is a big community, the commercial community, the procurement community, saying, it's almost sort of 40 billion that we're responsible for placing contracts with. So there's absolutely no reason. Again, these are brilliant. You come in and pitch in here. I need to get you in front of pitching. You can do it to all of the ICSs in one go because you can do it through that commercial community, and that commercial community have got their finger on the pulse of everything that we're buying, whether it be medical devices, products, services, etc. So for me, it's about being very, very deliberate. And I've committed to Tony that, I'm going to ensure that the commercial side, which is kind of the end of innovation sometimes, it's when you've done the innovative thing and you actually put it into a business that's sustainable and lasting and makes the difference. So I've committed that I'm going to be a big part of that going forward.
That's incredible. It's so good. So good. I think that gives us all hope, doesn't it? Because it's so true. We sometimes pilot things and they're like, oh, yeah, this is fine. Or we get funding and then they're all like, yes. As soon as that goes, it goes deadly silent. Even though you've got the data, we've got out there in the communities, it's that tumbleweed.
Yeah. But we also need to educate the innovators in the room.
Absolutely.
That's something we can do through this programme. Don't just think about we all get very sort of driven on what the innovation is and the clinical trials and everything else, but you need to think commercially as well. Yes. And most clinicians, they're brilliant, but they might not have the best commercial mind. Love you all. So it's just a question of, but people, we have. And so right at the beginning, right at the early stages, let's start thinking about your commercial strategy. Let's start thinking about how you're going to sell that, what your contracting needs to look like.
How refreshing is that? That's incredible. Really, really refreshing.
And I think, Jackie, that leads on perfectly, actually, to our next question for Colin. In your particular role within the education sphere, we are very lucky to have an ecosystem like this, of course, within the NHS. But in your opinion, how can we tailor medical education and training to promote innovation within our health service? And how can medical education be better adapted to prepare future healthcare professionals for commercialising an innovation and bringing it to, from bench to bedside, and for patients to receive the benefits of that?
These feel like dissertation questions.
I thought that was a very nice transition, actually.
I don't know what happened to the fireside, Jackie. We're in the 21st century. And much of the way health and care is delivered is not 21st century. And we need to have an honest check with ourselves about that. And I know that, important people like Steve Powers are in the room, but I would say that anyway. I think that our whole process currently is reactive. You don't see a patient until the patient decides they need to see you. And I've heard some of what's been talked about here about how do we get on the front of that? And there are all sorts of things around that. Then we have to say, okay, well, how does the health and care system develop in the 21st century? And what are the education needs that underpin that? I was listening yesterday to a talk about how do we deal with multiple morbidities? Well, if we don't know what the multiple morbidities are, how do we then cluster them to work out how we train the future workforce? And that's something that often I think, and it's good that Sarah's here, but we oversee all the postgraduate curricula, and therefore we have the opportunity to influence and steer some of those changes. And we are really keen to start to see how those changes begin to happen. Some of that, I suspect, means that we as doctors need to let go of things we've held on to for too long as being, but this is doctors' work. Or as I once said to people, well, we're short of doctors, you're too busy, but you won't let go of anything. That doesn't work. So some of the innovation is about efficiency, that's great, but we also need to have a real check with ourselves. I think it's amazing that we've now got endoscopists who are not doctors. Why is that such a big deal? It's just because that's not how we were brought up. So I think there's a real challenge for all of us to think much harder about what we do, and then we can help to steer that in partnership with others, because we approve the outcomes for graduates, so that's what happens at medical school, and then we also approve all the postgraduate curricula, and we're thinking more about how we do that in a much more lifelong learning way, so that all the bits join together. And my last comment would be something which I think I said in this room last time we met face to face, which is about the 3 horizons. The current horizon is where we are. The third horizon is where we need to get to. Innovation forms part of that intermediate horizon, but it will only work if it drives to the third horizon rather than pulling back to the first. And that's something in terms of innovation we need to think about. Don't design something that's innovative to simply prop up the current. We need to look further forward.
Fantastic, thank you.
And you know, it's exactly what Malone was just saying about, you know, the education system, and somebody else was talking about thinking about the inequalities that are deep within our communities and making sure that those innovations address those right at the root.
I'd like to call it, by the way, health equality, not health inequality.
Yes. Okay.
We need equality. And the focus then becomes on those who we see who are seen somehow to be less.
Yeah.
Actually, we need to make it and focus on the being equal.
Absolutely. Professor Clark, I think you gathered your breath. Thank you very much for joining us today. In addition to your role as the President of the Royal College of Physicians, you also work as a consultant cardiologist. In your experience, how can healthcare organisations and professionals ensure that patients are in the centre of the innovation process and that the benefits of the innovation are shared equitably across different patient groups? Sorry, it's another big one. It's another big one.
Quite a few questions there. I thought I was going to have a fireside chat because they took me to the bar first. Never mind. I'm really sorry to join you late and so sorry to miss all the pitches, but in fact, I've been doing a trust visit today, which is one of my roles as RCP president. But I'll just wind back a little bit further because I got involved in this sort of innovation area with Tony several years ago at the British Cardiovascular Society when Tony came up and started doing, we delivered a few hackathons and put some members into a room with Tony and entrepreneurs, and they came up with some fabulous solutions dealing with all these healthcare issues in a couple of days. And it was just to see the change in what they came up with in that short space of time, not really knowing what they were going in to do was really fascinating. And I've been on a sort of not so much an innovation journey, but an improvement journey and seeing opportunities for improvement through work I've done throughout my career as a clinical director, but also nationally with the Getting It Right First Time programme, the GIRF programme that you'll be all aware of. So that gives you an opportunity to go into trusts and see the problems, the real problems people are facing, and think, how could we do this better? What could we do better for our patients? But more than that, it is starting, as others have said, before the patient even gets into hospital. What can we do to prevent them coming in the first place? Take ownership of their health, not just illness, ownership of their health, and then when they discharge from hospital, continue that responsibility. So for me, it's been an interest, and I'm sorry I missed a lot of the pitches. But from the college perspective, there's two things that have done. The one programme that developed back in 2016 was the flexible portfolio training scheme, which allowed trainees to take 20% of their time, a day a week out, to do something different, sort of flexible working, if you like. So really it wasn't probably used in that time. So there's 4 areas that cover clinical informatics, medical education, QI, and research. So this gave people that opportunity to really start to explore, and has now moved into HEE, has been very successful. But we also have the Chief Registrar Programme, which also gives physicians an opportunity to take time out within their trust. It's supported by their trust, and you can spend time, up to 50% of your time, working within your trust to develop, for improvement. But improvement, of course, should also along the way identify innovation, and that's been hugely successful. And over 50% of trusts now have got a chief registrar, and we're going for 100%, of course. But to talk to some of these people who perhaps were disillusioned initially, and then they start doing this work and seeing opportunities, and they're supported, and they get education and support along the way, is really key. So going back to your question, really, what can we do? I think we're doing it, obviously, through NHS England and other programmes that you've probably heard about. There's a lot that's already being done, but from a college perspective, and also from the specialist societies, there's a lot that's being done.
Fantastic.
So thank you very much. So unfortunately, our time has come to an end. Sorry to lure you here under the premise of a fireside chat and ask all the tough questions, but thank you all very much for coming this evening.
It's a real pleasure to be here. I feel like I'm among my people. And so I just have to be very brief. I have 2 questions, and I hope you'll help me with the answers to these questions. And the first is, what is the biggest challenge we face in transforming the NHS? And the second is, why are we here tonight? Okay? So I loved Matt Whitty's answer to the question of what the biggest challenge is. Where's Matt? I just saw him. Oh, he popped out. Okay. Do you remember what he said? Who remembers what Matt said? That he said the biggest reason. It's important. It's actually a really good one. What did he say? Time. He said time. Right? Time is really, really important. We are all so busy. And we're doing BAU. We don't have the time to actually step back from what we're doing and redesign what we're doing, because we're doing it, and we're doing it really, really hard. It's a great answer. But I'll tell you, and this may be my North American background, but I see something else that is, I think, equally as strong. And it filtered through almost every person who spoke, even the pitches, but no one used the word. And so I feel it's my obligation to use the word. So what do you think that word is that impedes innovation and transformation? One word. Culture. No, but there's a specific aspect of the culture. So what's the opposite of bravery? Okay. I was going to use the word risk, but actually I'll take fear, because it is fear. Fear and risk are the 2 sides of the same coin, right? So what I see when I go around all over the country, and every Friday I spend with people doing innovations in various places. It was a part of my contract. I actually said, I will only come do this job if I can actually spend 1 day a week working with the people and looking at what is happening in this country. And it's by far the best day of my week, I just want to say. But what I see is extraordinary challenges, fear around risk. And this is where actually the second question comes in, because why are we here tonight? we are here tonight, I'll make an assertion. We are here tonight to create and recreate a community. That is why we are here tonight. So Marcel Mauss, Emile Durkheim, the sociologist, said this is what they would call a total social event. A total social event is when people come together to create their story and recreate their story. Every tribe in the world has total social events. It's how the cosmology is passed down through generations, and it provides the narrative for what that community is all about, right? That's what this event is all about. And the reason why that's important, really important for lots of different reasons, but something that I haven't heard said here tonight is that while there's incredible, Tony, thank you, this is amazing. Being an entrepreneur and working against fear and risk is an extraordinarily challenging thing to do. And it is really lonely. Okay, so we... And you have to stick with it through incredible numbers of rejections. Okay, that is really hard. And what makes that sustainable is this event. It's a community, because you now have more people to talk to, more people to support you, more people to get ideas from. Right? It is the creation of this community that is essential for us to address the fear. Now let me just close by talking a little bit about the fear. So I might say culturally, I'm going way out on a limb here, but my colleagues back in North America, I sometimes thought they were I wish they had a little more fear. Okay, so they were anything new and shiny, they just went after it. I will say, I think in my almost 2 years here, we are actually quite a ways away from that. Actually, our fear at the administrative level for making change is not aware of the counterfactual. It is aware of only the fact that with the status quo, I keep my job. With the status quo, I'm not sued. With the status quo, things won't change. But they need to change, don't they? And this is where the counterfactual comes in, because what I'm trying to do, and the people who work with me on my team know this, I'm trying to get people to articulate the counterfactual to that risk, because we see the risk of that new thing, but what we don't see, because it's called an ascertainment bias, what we don't see is the risk of continuing what we're doing. And continuing what we're doing is a huge problem, right? It is the boiling the frog problem. And I will just say it's the demographic, I mean, you all know this, it's the demographic wave. I'm a baby boomer. I know I don't look like it, but not the way I jumped over that, right? So it is the demographic wave. It is the morbidity at the top of the demographic wave. It's a multiplicative effect, multiple chronic conditions, as you said, Colin, and that against the aging of the population means that the way we deliver healthcare now cannot possibly work 10 years from now. Like, it's not even close. And this country is in a very advantageous position. Did you like the way I said that? This country is a very advantageous position because this country has underinvested in healthcare for a couple decades. And that means that we are approaching this demographic wave a little bit sooner but every country is the same thing is happening everywhere. It's just happening a little bit later. And this country is going to, through this program and all the people here, is going to show the rest of the world how we're going to solve this problem. That's up to you, Tony. Okay? So that is the advantage we face, but we have to understand the counterfactual. The counterfactual to taking that risk is that the current way of, and this is a problem because that risk of that innovation is right there in front of me. But what's happening in the counterfactual is very slow. It's very slow, but it is aggregating and accreting a problem for the delivery of healthcare. Every day, it gets a tiny bit worse. Actually, it's not every day it gets a tiny bit worse. I don't know the statistic here, but in the US, 20 years ago, 5,000 people were becoming age 65, so retirement age, Medicare age, in the US, 5,000 people. Today, 30,000 people every day, every single day, are aging into Medicare. That's the demographic wave. So this is gonna happen in every country. Most countries, it'll actually happen in about 30 years in China in a really big way. But the NHS and all of you, all of us, we are facing this right now. So why are we here tonight? We are here tonight to create a community that is going to address and succeed in addressing the biggest challenge in healthcare that this world faces, which is the way we deliver healthcare has to radically change. Thank you.
Hi everybody, this is Min. I manage tech pilots in the NHS. I also have lived experience in eating disorders for quite a few years. And before that, I also worked in a mental health company that was bringing psychedelics to treat depression. Cool, right? People living with depression or bipolar disorder are almost always asked to track their mood every single day or as much as possible. And this is fundamental to understanding how you're doing and if interventions are working. But almost every single person that we've spoken to told us that they can't keep tracking their mood. And almost every psychiatrist that we spoke to told us that they can't get their patients to track mood. We're too busy. We forget. It doesn't stick as a habit. So Human is creating an app that can automatically track your mood using anonymized smartphone data. This is a really special opportunity for people living with mood disorders because it allows people to track mood symptoms seamlessly, and it gives people access to pattern analysis that people have been wanting for so long, all the way from detecting mood cycles to seeing what behaviors actually impact your mood. So if you're passionate about mental health, or if you're working in mental health currently, please come speak to me, and you can also contact us at human.uk. Thank you.
Next is Roberto Villa, founder and CEO of Greener Planet for Us.
Hi. So a few years ago, I was watching a documentary about a native African berry that has been consumed for centuries for its taste-altering properties. And I knew nothing about it. It's called miracle berry. When you consume a miracle berry, the active ingredient called miraculin will bind to the taste buds on your tongue and will temporarily alter your taste perception for sweet and sour flavors. This basically means that when you eat something that typically tastes sour, it will taste sweet instead. So you can enjoy sweet flavors without consuming any added sugars or artificial sweeteners, which we know are main contributing factors to obesity, diabetes, and being overweight. So the berries could save some of the £6 billion that obesity costs the NHS every year. But the clinical possibilities are endless. You can improve the flavor of certain medicines, like for pediatrics, or you can get rid of the metallic taste that certain chemotherapy drugs would have as a side effect. Tonight, I would like to introduce you to Wonderberry. Wonderberry tablets are chewable tablets made from natural miracle berries. My name is Roberto. I'm a pharmacist and I'm the CEO and founder of WandaBerry. I'm looking for investors and collaborators. So if you're interested and would like to talk to me, I would be delighted to give you more information. Thank you.
Okay, and next on stage we have Rosalind Bunhu with her 24-hour pregnancy resource. There you go.
So, from a small survey that I've just done, Black women want to have informative, supportive information about their pregnancy journey. They want it easily accessible and they want it 24/7. Hi, my name is Roz and I've been a midwife for over 10 years. And I've created a prototype web app called Ame Matoto, which simply means mother and child for Black women. As you know, that they're 3.7 times more likely to die in childbirth in the UK. I'm hoping that my app will help empower Black women to take ownership of their health and also gain additional knowledge in their pregnancy journey. It's going to be focusing on exercising, diet and cultural foods, mental well-being, parent education, and also creating a community online. Representation matters. Black women need their own space so that they can get valuable and trusted information. Healthcare professionals can use it too as a tool of signposting and an advice tool as well. So if you are, I need tech experts, I need money, I need mentorship. So if you are as passionate as I am about sort of like addressing the inequalities of Black maternal health, please come and find me. I'll be happy to chat to you and hopefully like put this at the agenda of the NHS. Thank you.
And next we have Chetan Kahar, co-founder and chief innovation officer of Jita AI.
Hi guys, my name is Chetan Kahar. I'm a dentist and I've got an interest in understanding how my patients' data can make their diagnosis and treatment better, which is why I'm also the co-founder of Jiva.ai. Healthcare data is expanding exponentially, but increasingly there's more and more difficulty understanding it due to the costs, times, and resources required. So what do? We make AI easy using a simple, no-code, drag-and-drop platform, saving our clients 80% on the time and cost of developing AI, meaning that you guys can build your AI models quickly at minimal costs. So, how does it work? So you can put any kind of data into Jiva, you tell us what you're looking for, and the platform will go off and build you hundreds of AI models using every relevant technique. You choose the AI model that's the most accurate for your data set, and you can deploy it within an ISO-regulated framework. This enables you to build predictions from anywhere from drug discovery right over to diagnostic predictions. This is easy to say, of course, but we've already tried and tested it. So we've got diagnostics at over 90% accuracy in prostate cancer and liver disease. And we're working with two international EMR systems in primary and secondary healthcare to bring predictive analytics to multiple diseases. So if you're in... Oh, you can speak to me afterwards. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
We'll be welcoming on stage Professor Jacqueline Dunkley-Bent, Chief Midwifery Officer and Professor of Midwifery at King College, London and London South Bank University. Big round of applause. David Webb, Chief Pharmaceutical Officer for England. And Jason Wong, Deputy Chief Dental Officer for England. You can sit down for this one, I think. So we'll go straight into it, if that's okay. So I might be biased here, but I think and I believe midwives were the first innovators in healthcare and always will be. My first question is to you, Professor Jacqueline Dunkley-Bent. Me being a midwife myself and absolutely passionate about improving equality and optimising maternal health through innovation and collaboration, how do we tap into this great innovative skill that midwives have to make sure that they join this group in this room today?
Well, that's a really big question. This is my first time in this den, I would call it, and I've been absolutely blown away and inspired, I have to say. And if we could harness all this innovation, all these brain cells into a small vial, I think our NHS would be absolutely phenomenal. But in terms of the maternity space, I think we've heard a lot of basic human needs expressed from a lot of the pitches, the basic needs of food, mental health capacity. And thinking about the maternity space, I actually think that people need time. They need to have capacity, they need to have encouragement. We're all risk averse, me included. Let's just be a little bit honest about this. So we need that time to step into a space where we can iron sharpens iron, be sharpened, be encouraged, be enthused. There are certain people in this room that have the formula, and we need to nurture them, nurture people back at base to have that capacity, that space to use their skills, because what they do will ripple through generations if we give them the time to be nurtured to do that very thing, the thing that ripples through generations. And my ambition really is that the innovators here today can assist us to not only create efficiencies, but more importantly, improve outcomes.
Absolutely.
And I've heard a lot of that today. So I sit here thinking, this is going to save a life. Why are we pontificating about this? And of course, research trials matter, and we have to get it right. But, with the equity guidance that we have for NHS England, trying to level up, I promised myself I'd never say that, but here I am saying, but, the equity guidance that we've published from NHS England, there is something about pace that's really important, because 4 times more likely to die in pregnancy than your white counterpart, twice more likely to die in pregnancy than your advantaged counterpart. There is something about pace that we need to get right today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And it's so true. It's so true. And working with Jacqueline Rock and making sure that commercial model captures that essence that we've seen today and then plugs that into maternity service. Like you said, the possibilities is absolutely endless. Thank you so much. Fangirling you at the minute.
David, next question to you, if that's okay. At the start of this pitch evening, we discussed that we have representation from across the NHS, including many pharmacists, some of whom we've heard about today. But in your opinion, how do you see the pharmaceutical industry evolving over the next 5 years? And how do we, as the NHS, stay sort of competitive on a world stage and make sure that we're at the forefront of innovation within the pharmaceutical industry?
Thanks, Pasha. It's kind of like an economic question as well as an innovation question, isn't it? So from my point of view, I think there are sort of 2 elements to this, really. There's the sort of innovation, high-tech medicines part of what we do and how we bring that in. So, there are sort of examples we can think about now. I think NICE has 48 advanced therapeutic medicinal products on its horizon for the next 3 years in 59 indications. Each of those bring about precision medicine, specific targeting to people and huge innovation. That brings its challenges because we have to be ready to adopt that. We have to have the facilities that make that possible at the same time as doing all the work that we would do in the non-precision space to look after that demographic wave that Tim talked about. So I think both things have to be true at the same time. I don't think it's either or. how we stay ahead of that game, I think there are a number of things really. There's the whole sort of digital edifice of what we do. There's and in that I'd put how do we respond to the fact that, so I think we're getting used to the fact that our patients now know a lot more about their conditions. In the future, they're going to know a lot more about their own genomic composition, and how do we start to respond to those conversations? So I think that's really important. There's AI and automation and the impact that has on the workforce. And the last part is the sort of clinical decision-making support as well. So I think putting all of those together, being ambitious in the way Tim mentioned, and I guess, you know, looking at the sort of issues we've got and recognising that's the opportunity to be first, I think he's absolutely right. We should grab that.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Hi. Don't look so scared. So, Jason Wong. Dentistry can sometimes be seen as a separate entity to the NHS, but often the first line of an indicator of a health inequality, or first line of a kind of defence of health inequalities as well. So how can dentists in this room optimise integration and innovation to reduce health inequalities?
Well, that's quite a question, actually, isn't it? So, I mean, when you look at you said sort of separate entity, almost described as a Cinderella service, isn't it?
Yeah.
Dentistry to a certain extent. Obviously, there's huge pressures going around. I think you're quite right in terms of at the front end of equality, or as was said, rather than inequality. The impact of dental disease has far more impact on deprived communities than it does in other communities. So we see that very starkly, especially in children's oral health, in terms of people going to a hospital for having their teeth out. The other thing is, I think as a discipline, we're moving more from really a quite surgical intervention type discipline to more physician-based. So, you know, where oral health has impact, the crossing with diabetes, mental health, all cardiovascular disease and all the pilots that have gone on, actually it's going to be really at the forefront. So going back, I think it was Colin that said something about the reactive of the health service and only treating people that come in. Actually, dentistry has a completely different cohort of people that come through our doors. Yeah. And, you know, it's very much demand-led as well. So when you've got common risk factor towards prevention, yeah, the innovation should come from how you can integrate that back into care when, you know, we're concentrating on dental disease, but actually all the prevention has implications on obesity, diabetes, and all the rest of it. So I think that's where the innovation has to come from, to integrate that back in. Of course, that would benefit patients and the profession as well.
Absolutely. And, you know, just echoing what you've said, it's about being inclusive and accessible to that underserved population. And sometimes they don't have that access to dental care as well.
Yeah, and I think that's difficult. So the inverse care law exists in a much bigger way in dentistry, actually. So those people that need it most actually are the least likely to access it, as well as having the access problem. So when I think back about the work that I did with the children's oral health in Leicester City and also Leicestershire, you can kind of map out where the disease is to population base that you're concerned about. But actually the impact, the people that actually have intervention in terms of the general anaesthetics, actually you could almost map out by ward according to which communities that they come from and map it against deprivation. So yeah, I think it's absolute key in terms of how the profession approaches that. And I think that we've got to use technology both in terms of granting access. There's always a worry, isn't there, with technology, that you have a lot of technology, and there's a part of society that misses out on that. Yeah. And that's something we've got to be careful of. But there's no question that in terms of increasing access and allowing the patient access is absolute key.
Thank you so much. Thank you to
Thank you very much for all of those insights. I mean, and just to sort of to close off this panel discussion, and not to put anybody on the spot, but does anybody have any particular sort of innovations that they've come across that stood out to them? No problem if nothing comes to mind now, but I think we'd all be interested to see, from yourselves, if there are, what kind of innovations are at the moment ticking the right boxes for you.
Can I make a sort of just an observation on in terms of the pictures I've heard today, which I think have been brilliant, actually. So I came in with a sort of mindset that, particularly in the digital arena, that we always have to be quite conscious of the fact we don't want to amplify inequality by differential access to technology and all of those sort of things. What's really struck me about everybody's pitch so far is a real focus on health equity, using that as a very positive thing for change. And I think that's to be commended. I'm completely sort of converted to seeing this as a positive, not a risk. So congratulations to all of you for sort of making that possible. If I could be really parochial for one moment as well, I really like the show me my medicines idea, or show me your medicines idea as well, because I think that's, that it's simple, isn't it? But the kernel of something really important about how people interface with this technology that we give them every day. So congratulations to everybody. One last thought from me as well, if I might. And it goes to Tim's point about where we are at the moment and this sort of lack of time. So not only is what the entrepreneurs do important for their social purpose, their target audience, for you as individuals, but I think for those of us who are working really hard in the health service at the moment, sometimes what we need is a glimpse of inspiration. And providing that and being part of something where this is possible is just so encouraging for people who are working really hard at the sharp end.
Absolutely. Oh, thank you. We couldn't have ended that any better. Thank you. First up is Sabrina Ahmed, co-founder of Moneytree. Oh, where are you? There you go. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Sabrina. I'm a GP registrar with a degree in psychology. My co-founder Stuart's an A&E registrar with a degree in economics. He handles your money matters, I handle your mental health, and together we've created Moneytree, the NHS Workers' Guide to Healthier Financial Wellbeing. Moneytree was born from our frustration at not having access to clear and concise information about money-related matters that affect us. Existing information is often lengthy, complicated, and tedious to read. We realise we can't be the only ones struggling with this, and over 75% of our workforce is struggling with poor financial wellbeing, and this is costing our NHS over £500 million a year. So we created Moneytree, a mobile app for all NHS staff that provides the ease of financial guidance with the fun and gamified format. It contains easy-to-understand guides from financial topics on the NHS pension, maternity pay and salary sacrifice schemes, a personalised financial calendar so that you never miss a financial deadline again, and a money-saving annual target achievable by you as an NHS worker. Through using Moneytree, a HCA was able to save £125 a year just from the cost of washing her uniforms, and a junior doctor saved £8,000 on moving expenses for changing deaneries. Moneytree is here to make the complicated simple and to provide a financially healthier and happier workforce. Thanks for listening.
Okay, thank you very much, Sabrina. So next we have Batia Wijayakun.
Thank you, everyone. So my name is Bharti Wijayakun. I'm a rheumatology consultant. Patients with chronic or long-term medical conditions have complex care needs, and in hospital systems, these care needs are managed using care pathways. These care pathways are quite difficult for organizations to effectively manage and have become even more challenging after the COVID pandemic with the need for new ways of working, including things like patient-initiated follow-up. In my practice as a consultant rheumatologist, I've seen how the confusion arising from these pathways can lead to patient harm, with my patients either developing irreversible joint damage, drug side effects, or infection. So this prompted me to develop a software solution called MedLogic. MedLogic simplifies complex care pathways and stops patients getting lost. It reduces the risk of harm. But it does more than this. And in a 5-year pilot study in rheumatology, we in fact improved the quality of care we were able to provide patients by making sure they were seen by the right person at the right time. The system also helped to fast-track stable patients into less intense care pathways. Colleagues in other specialties have taken an interest in this technology, and we're looking for funding, support, and investment to carry out a pilot in gastroenterology and develop it further to support multimorbidity. Thank you.
And next we've got Francis Duffy, founder of Clear Dementia Care.
Mary was a resident in a care home who'd been served an eviction notice because of escalating aggression. When I went to see her, she was a 93-year-old, very frail lady who was frightened and confused. She was standing at the care home, shaking the door because she needed to get home to her children. I was able to give advice to the care staff and we avoided a hospital admission. So my name's Frances Duffy and I developed Clear Dementia Care training to help carers and staff to understand dementia and reduce distress. Following our excellent outcomes, we've delivered training to a number of NHS and other organisations across the UK, Ireland and Jersey. And we're at the stage now where we're looking to develop a training platform. So I'm looking for a partner to help me to do that so that we can offer good quality training to all carers, social care staff and NHS staff so that we can reduce distress, we can avoid carer burden, we can reduce hospital admissions, placement breakdown and associated savings to the health economy. So if you're interested, then please come and speak to me afterwards. Thank you.
Last but not least, for the pitchers of this evening, we have Dean Harris, co-founder of CanSense Limited.
It's a fact that every other person in this room will develop cancer in your lifetime. Don't we expect to be able to have our worrying cancer symptoms assessed quickly, accurately, and in a way that's acceptable to ourselves? My name is Dean Harris. I'm a professor of colorectal surgery. I'm also co-founder of CanSense. So we're looking to change all of this. We're using our CanSense CRC blood test to read the biological barcode of signals from colorectal cancer at early stage and also polyps in the blood so that we can develop a way to quickly diagnose them for patient benefit. We're looking at other cancers too, that we're hoping to use the blood test primarily in primary care because the GPs need a much better way to risk assess the symptoms that their patients come to them with. And also there's such a huge backlog in colonoscopy waiting lists that we need a better solution to help prioritize which patients get that test much more quickly. We have a strong patient preference for the CanSense test over other mechanisms. So isn't it right that we should offer choice to those patients rather than the typical poo test, then colonoscopy, one-size-fits-all model? What we're looking for is to further our partnerships with the NHS to bring this scalable, affordable solution to improve cancer detection for all. Thank you.
We know that we wouldn't be here and standing here, sitting here and listening to these amazing innovations if it wasn't for the incredible mentors that we have had. So did you know that there was over 25,000 hours of mentoring that's been delivered to the clinical entrepreneurs over the last 6 years? That, oh, go on. We've all benefited from both formal and informal mentors. And I just wanted to take a special moment to thank mentors, because without you, without your direction, without your hours, without your shoulders to cry on, we would not be getting our innovations to places where we are. And I've got a lot of nodding heads in the room, so I know it's not just me that want to give this massive shout out to them. mentor matching is just one of the many benefits that you can have within the Clinical Entrepreneur Programme. And it's those unsung heroes that push us to that next level. So join me and give them a huge round of applause. You know who you are. Come and join me, Pasha. And the biggest mentor is our Tony Young. Now, he doesn't know what we're going to say here, so I can see him squirming on the stairs right there with his hands on his face. But he doesn't need any introduction. People know who Tony Young is. And if you don't know him, then you'll know what he says. And that word is wow. Wow. And I challenge you, Tony, not to say that. Because he can't. And I understand why, you know, it's incredible what we do, but wow. And I liken Tony, when we was talking about what to do, I was thinking, what can we do? And I kind of liken him to a turtle. Go with me. So, cowabunga, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, very hard on the outside, ready to fight for us as innovators, keeping us safe, making sure that he paves the way for innovation and equity in healthcare. But also, I'm sure you love pizza, and wow as well. So I promise you, he is not this hard man that will just rip you apart with the pictures. He isn't that. He is also a really approachable guy that will always fight for equity, especially for women in healthcare, which I personally want to thank you for. Because without you, I wouldn't be here. So come on stage. Give a big round of applause to our Tony.
Thank you. Right, do you want to...
Yeah, there you go.
Gosh, you know what the first word on my speech is. You read it. I had to spend 45 minutes today outside with Amanda Pritchard because she wanted to meet some of the innovators one-to-one. And she said, Tony, you say wow at everything. And so even Amanda was saying wow at the end, but she did agree. Right. What? Oh, I'm going to need my glasses. I've changed it. What an evening. What amazing pitches and conversations we have heard. How inspiring was the whole day, and then topped off by this evening. This is our second time at the Royal Institution. When we were here before, we welcomed our 500th clinical entrepreneur, and tonight we welcome our 1,000th. This evening, you've already heard some of the incredible accomplishments of our clinical entrepreneurs. Over 130 million patients, professionals and users have benefited from their innovations. Over 420 startups have been founded, making the Clinical Entrepreneur Programme responsible for creating 8% of the UK life science industry from scratch in just 6 years. Wow. Wow. Hang on. And £868 million raised by clinical entrepreneur startups since 2016. That is over $1 billion. So the first unicorn from the Clinical Entrepreneur Programme is the Clinical Entrepreneur Programme. I did it. I knew I would do it. And who would have believed that was possible when we started this? And it all came from the NHS. Now, just look at what can happen when you empower your workforce, the largest group of professionals on the planet we have. But how is it that the NHS has created the world's largest and most successful entrepreneurial training program in healthcare and life science? Well, and it was so interesting hearing what Tim said earlier. It was like he'd read some of my speech, but he hadn't. Well, when we were founding the program, one of the things that inspired me was a speech given by Theodore Roosevelt at the Sorbonne in Paris in 1910. And I know some of you will have come across this before, but for me, the power behind the words aligns with what we're trying to achieve. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong stumble or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if they fail, at least fail while daring greatly. Wow. That speech highlighted 4 things to me. It's not about winning, it's not about losing, it's about showing up and giving your all. It's about being true to who you are and doing something amazing. Secondly, if you are going to enter this arena, trying and creating, succeeding and failing, you are going to get judged and criticised by others. It cannot be avoided. So you're also going to have to be courageous if you're going to do this. Thirdly, it gave me a different perspective on criticism. I am all up for constructive feedback and learning, but if you're criticising me from the sidelines and not putting yourself on the line, frankly, you can keep your opinions. Lastly, it's about taking personal ownership of an issue, being bold and giving credit to the person who is in the arena. There is uncertainty in what you are striving for, and that will make you vulnerable. But vulnerability is a quality to be prized rather than a weakness to be avoided. What a profound speech, and what great lessons to apply as we developed a new programme. And boy, have we had our fair share of armchair critics over the last 6 years. Another thing I reflected on as we founded the programme was the patient interactions I have had over the years of being a clinician. It struck me that there was an unwritten agreement between us at each consultation. Before we start, we agree the boundaries of our consultation. It will be open, honest, plain speaking, private and vulnerable. And in return, patients can expect reliability, accountability, integrity, no judgment of them, and kindness. So we applied this doctor-patient approach to our mentor-clinical entrepreneur relationship. And you can ask any of our clinical entrepreneurs, one of the most valuable parts of the scheme has been the mentoring from over 250 cross-sector and world-leading experts who give their time freely to the National Health Service. And I want to say thank you to them, because we couldn't achieve what we do without you. Our clinical entrepreneurs also face much uncertainty in what they are trying to achieve. They often feel exposed and at risk as they challenge the status quo. However, in my view, uncertainty is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change. And striving to do your best with uncertainty is one of the most accurate markers of courage that we have. So if you're going to enter the arena, as so many of our clinical entrepreneurs have done throughout the day today, then courage is exactly what they have, and it is one of the core values I observe in all our innovators and entrepreneurs. Isn't that what Tim was saying? The thing that stops us is the fear. The thing that our entrepreneurs display is the courage. I didn't know Tim was going to say that. We've come so far in 6 short years, but none of that would have been possible without the support of our partners at Health Education England, who've been with us from the start. I wanted to extend particular thanks to Professor Shiona McLeod and Patrick Mitchell. Also, with many sponsors and partners of the programme that provide specific expertise, mentoring, industry days, placements, and much, much more. And I wanted to acknowledge that and say thank you. We have also developed international partnerships over the last year with Hirani in Northern Ireland, the Digital Health and Care Innovation Centre in Scotland, and the Health Innovation Hub in Ireland, all contributing entrepreneurs to the programme. And in this last year, the Australian government have commissioned a 2-year trial of the Clinical Entrepreneur Programme in Australia. Wow! However, perhaps one of the partnerships I am most proud of is our one with Crisis. We welcomed 4 entrepreneurs from their venture studios last year, and this year we're going to welcome a further 4. You heard from Mama Essay on a panel earlier. Where are you? Around somewhere. There, oh, there you are, right in the front. Okay. Wasn't she amazing? And what courage she showed. She has never done anything like this before. Wow. You'd never have known, would you? She looked like a pro. Also, the backing of system leaders is so important. We've had Matt Whitty, Sir Steve Powis, Tim Ferriss, Jackie Rock, Amanda Pritchard, David Webb, Prof. Jacqueline Dunkley-Bent, Jason Wong, Prof. Colin Melville, Prof. Sarah Clark. With their support, the sky really is the limit. Wow. However, there are also some other thanks. My CEO at Mid and South Essex, Hannah Coffey, and Charlotte Williams, our Chief Strategy and Improvement Officer, my Vice-Chancellor at Anglia Ruskin University, Roderick Watkins, they give me permission to go out and do these things. I also want to thank the amazing team at NHS England that support the work we do here. Christina Farrow, Alex Gonzala, and Amy Cousins. They keep the show on the road and keep me out of causing too much trouble. I also have to say a big thank you to the Clinical Entrepreneur Programme team at Anglia Ruskin University. Polly Sullivan, Lucy Dentis, Emily Griffith, and Jen Pym. Their tireless efforts, emails, calls, coordinations, reminders, organisation, and so much more. They give their all to the Clinical Entrepreneur Programme, and it would not have achieved what it has without them. So thank you, Polly and team. Lastly, I want to thank Gemma and Pasha. Haven't they done a great job? Come forward. However, I haven't had a chance to hear them pitch. And I love to hear a pitch. So, you've both got really great innovations. Where's my phone? Because I didn't tell them to be so ruthless on the timing with the pitches. Oh, wow. Right, let me have that. You get 60 seconds each and I'm going to clap.
60?
You get 60, no more.
Okay.
Right, here we go. Off you go.
It's fair to say bringing a baby into this world is tough. But it was twice as tough for me and people who look like me. And it personally impacted my family 3 years ago. Health inequalities and obstetric incidences cost the economy £3.6 billion a year alone. My name is Gemma. I'm a midwife and the founder of Essential Baby Company. Our aim is to co-produce inclusive tools and resources for black and brown skinned women and deliver that in the heart of the community, in a one-stop shop that targets the health inequalities at the heart. We also use local voices to inform healthcare professionals in equity-driven training. We aim to be the go-to organisation that bridges the gap between a marginalised birthing community and healthcare, product design, research, to ensure that our community benefit from our services.
You get it, go on. Right, Pasha, let's see if you can do any better, shall we?
I doubt that. By the way, he told us 90 seconds and now he's completely set us up.
No, don't go back on it. Your time started, you're wasting it, get on.
All right, thank you, Tony. So poor circulation is a major global health issue and results in the loss of life and loss of limb. But shockingly, 10 million cases of poor circulation are misdiagnosed each year in the UK alone. And the reason for this is outdated technology that is used for bedside testing. So the most commonly used test is a piece of technology that was built in the 1950s and is as old as the radio. And I think you would all agree that that technology needs to be updated and brought into the 21st century. And as a vascular surgeon working in the NHS, I've seen the consequences of misdiagnosis every day. And that's why I've developed SmartFlow. SmartFlow is a software that transforms these old analog devices into powerful diagnostic machines using signal processing and patented AI technology. So if you are an investor or an engineer in the crowd who wants to change the lives of millions of patients with poor circulation, then come and please talk to me after the show.
In July this year, the National Health Service will celebrate its 75th year. The NHS was the first universal healthcare system in the world, and I would say it is the greatest social innovation of the modern era. However, it continues to face challenges, and perhaps now they are greater than they have ever been. That is exactly why we need our workforce to step forward. They are best placed to help identify the problems, and we will support them in refining, developing, trialling, adopting, and scaling the solutions. So finally, my ask to you all is to get up out of your seats, roll up your sleeves, and join me and over 1,000 NHS clinical entrepreneurs in the arena and help us launch the National Health Service into its next 75 years. Thank you.